Maria always prided herself on her meticulous attention to detail and unwavering discipline. These traits had carried her through the rigorous demands of university life, making her a standout student in her economics program. As the final year began, anticipation and excitement filled the air, but a subtle unease started to cast a shadow over Maria's once vibrant spirit. It was a sunny Tuesday morning, the kind that usually found Maria seated in the front row of her advanced macroeconomics class, her notes prepared the night before, her mind buzzing with analytical questions. However, today was different. For the first time in her academic career, Maria's seat remained empty long after the professor had begun the lecture. The clock ticked away, marking each minute of her unusual absence. When she finally slipped into the classroom, the lecture was halfway through, and her entrance went unnoticed by everyone except her close friend, Jenna. Jenna's brow furrowed in concern as she watched Maria quietly take her seat, avoiding eye contact. There was something off about her friend's usually impeccable appearance. Her hair was less kempt, her clothes slightly disheveled. This wasn't the Maria she knew, who treated each day like a meticulously planned mission. Later that day, at their usual lunch spot on campus, Jenna decided to broach the subject. "Everything okay, Maria? You're not yourself today," she asked gently, passing Maria a sandwich. Maria forced a smile, her eyes not quite meeting Jenna's. "Just didn't sleep well, I guess. Lot on my mind with the thesis and all," she replied, brushing off her friend's concern. Jenna wasn't convinced but decided to give her friend some space. As weeks turned into months, Maria's punctuality issues became more frequent, and her participation in class dwindled. Her contributions, once insightful and sharp, now seemed forced and sparse. Professors who had come to expect so much from her began to whisper concerns, puzzled by the sudden change in her demeanor and performance. One evening, Jenna visited Maria's apartment, hoping to understand what was troubling her friend. The room, usually neat and orderly, was cluttered with various devices and gadgets that seemed out of place among Maria's economics textbooks and research papers. It struck Jenna then, these were not just ordinary gadgets, they were the kind Maria had started to rely on excessively, under the guise of stress relief. Sitting down next to Maria on the couch, Jenna took her friend's hand. "Talk to me, Maria. What's going on? This isn't just about being busy or stressed, is it?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Maria looked at Jenna, her eyes welling up with tears. "I don't know how it got to this point," she admitted, her voice cracking. "It started as a way to unwind, to escape from the pressure, but now I feel like I can't get through the day without them." Jenna listened as Maria poured out her fears and struggles. The gadgets, initially a means to relax, had become a crutch, an escape from the mounting pressure of her final year. They had become an addiction that was slowly taking over her life, affecting her studies, her relationships, and her well-being. Determined to help her friend, Jenna encouraged Maria to seek help. "You're not alone in this, Maria. Let's find someone who can offer professional advice. We can get through this together," Jenna said, squeezing her hand. As they sat together, a plan began to form, a plan to help Maria reclaim the life she once loved, starting with a visit to the campus counseling center. For Maria, the journey back to herself was just beginning, and with Jenna by her side, she felt a flicker of hope. As autumn deepened, the leaves turned golden and the air chilled, but the atmosphere in Maria's room grew increasingly stifling. Her once pristine and orderly space, a sanctuary of knowledge and intellectual pursuit, began to mirror the chaos brewing within her. The stacks of textbooks and lecture notes that had dominated the desk were gradually pushed aside, replaced by an array of gadgets that seemed innocuous at first glance. Initially, Maria used these devices sparingly, a curious exploration spurred by a friend's casual mention and her own burgeoning stress. However, as the semester's demands intensified, so too did her reliance on these gadgets. They promised a quick escape, a brief respite from her anxieties and the crushing weight of expectations. What began as a novelty became a necessity. Maria found herself retreating to her room more frequently, her study breaks growing longer and more indulgent. Her friends, Jenna and Louise, who had been her study partners since freshman year, were the first to notice the shift. They saw less of Maria, her door was often closed, and she began to excuse herself from group activities with vague reasons of feeling tired or unwell. Jenna, who had always admired Maria's tenacity and focus, felt a pang of concern when she texted Maria about reviewing for an upcoming exam only to receive a half-hearted reply that she'd catch up later. One evening, Jenna decided to confront the issue. She knocked softly on Maria's door, which now always seemed shut, a barrier that hadn't existed between them before. "Maria, can we talk?" Jenna asked gently, pushing the door open. The sight that greeted her was a far cry from the tidy, organized Maria she knew. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of a desk lamp, which cast long shadows over the clutter of wires and devices. "Hey, Jenna," Maria's voice lacked its usual warmth. She quickly shuffled some items under her bed, a flush creeping up her neck. Jenna stepped inside, her concern mounting. "I've been worried about you," she started, hesitating as she chose her words carefully. "You've been so distant lately. Is everything okay?" Maria forced a smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah, I'm just really swamped with stuff, you know, end of semester craziness." But Jenna wasn't convinced. "It's not just that, Maria. You're missing study sessions, and we barely see you anymore. And all these gadgets, it's not like you. What's going on?" Maria looked away, her fingers tracing the edge of her desk. "It's nothing, really. I just found something that helps me relax. It's not a big deal." Jenna sat down beside her, her voice soft but firm. "It feels like a big deal. It's affecting your studies, our friendship. I miss my friend." The words hung heavily in the room. Maria felt a knot tighten in her chest. Jenna's honesty broke through the fog of denial that had begun to cloud her judgment. She realized how far she had strayed from her usual self, how deep she had sunk into her new habit. "Maybe I do need help," Maria admitted, her voice barely a whisper. The admission was a crack in the dam, the first step towards acknowledging how much she had come to depend on the false comfort of her gadgets. Jenna reached out, squeezing her hand. "We'll figure this out together," she promised, her presence a reminder of the support system Maria had taken for granted. That night marked the beginning of Maria's journey back to herself, one filled with challenges and introspection. But with Jenna's support, she started to believe that she could regain control, mend the frayed edges of her life, and rediscover the strength she feared she had lost. Maria had always believed she could manage her life's challenges on her own terms, relying on nothing more than her resilience and determination. But as the semester wore on, the consequences of her unchecked habits began to unravel the very fabric of her carefully constructed world. The day she missed her crucial midterm exam was a glaring red flag not just to her friends but to Maria herself, though she wasn't ready to admit it. That morning, as the alarm blared through her apartment, Maria lay entangled in the sheets, the buzzing of her gadgets a constant undercurrent. The once sporadic indulgence had become a nightly ritual, a supposed escape from her escalating stress and anxiety. However, instead of providing relief, it tethered her further to a cycle of dependency that she was yet to acknowledge fully. As she raced to class, the streets blurring past her, Maria felt a sinking feeling. Arriving just as the last students handed in their papers, the finality of the situation hit her. Her professor's disappointed gaze was a silent rebuke that pierced her more deeply than any words could. This wasn't just a minor slip-up, it was a significant failure, jeopardizing her scholarship and her future. The fallout was immediate. Rumors started to circulate, her once pristine academic reputation now tarnished with whispers of unreliability. Her friends, concerned and confused by her increasingly erratic behavior, confronted her. They gathered in her room, the very space that once hosted their group studies, now a chaotic reflection of Maria's turmoil. "We're worried about you," Jenna, her closest friend, began hesitantly. "You've missed classes, tests, and now this. It's not like you, Maria." Maria's room, cluttered with devices and dimly lit, felt suffocating as her friend's eyes searched hers for an explanation. The walls seemed to close in on her as she stood there, the weight of their concern and her own shame mingling into a heavy silence. "I can handle it," Maria replied defensively, her voice a mixture of defiance and despair. "It's just been a tough semester, that's all." But Jenna wasn't convinced. "It's more than that, Maria. This isn't just stress. You're avoiding us, missing important things. What's really going on?" The question hung in the air, dense and accusatory. Maria knew the answer lay in the very gadgets that filled her room, the ones she had come to rely on far too heavily. Yet, admitting that felt like uncovering a wound she wasn't ready to expose. "I just need to get organized, really." "I'll be fine," Maria insisted, even as her voice faltered, betraying her uncertainty. Her friends exchanged worried glances, their skepticism clear. They left her with offers of help and pleas to reach out, but Maria felt more isolated than ever as the door closed behind them. That night, alone in her room, the reality of her situation began to truly settle in. The gadgets that had promised escape had become her prison. Maria lay awake, the glow of her phone illuminating the stark loneliness of her existence. It was a loneliness compounded not by the absence of people, but by the barriers she had built against them. In the early hours of the morning, as the first light of dawn crept through her blinds, Maria knew something had to change. She could no longer deny the destructive path she was on. The gadgets, once a means to cope, now symbolized her loss of control, her disconnect from everything she valued. As the sun rose, so did Maria's resolve to seek help, to reconnect with her life and the people in it. It was time to untether herself from the false security of her gadgets and face the challenges of her reality, not alone, but with the support of those who cared. Maria's addiction was no longer a private struggle, it was spilling over into the very streets she walked. On a brisk autumn day, the reality of her situation came crashing down around her during what should have been a routine visit to the campus library. As she sat in a secluded corner, her focus wasn't on the textbooks sprawled in front of her but on the small, discreet bag at her side, which housed her collection of gadgets. Initially, these gadgets were her secret escape, a way to momentarily step away from the pressures of academia. But now, their presence was as commanding as the need to breathe. As she reached for the bag, her hands trembled, her heartbeat thundered in her ears, and a bead of sweat trickled down her temple. The library, usually a haven of scholarly pursuit, became the backdrop for her deepest compulsion. Maria was so engrossed that she didn't notice a group of her classmates approaching until it was too late. They stopped, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern as they took in the scene before them. Maria's face flushed with shame, her secret laid bare. She tried to shove the gadgets back into her bag, her movements frantic, her eyes wild with panic. "Maria, are you okay?" one of her classmates asked, stepping forward with a worried look. The concern was genuine, but to Maria, it felt like an interrogation spotlight. I'm fine, just studying, Maria stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Her words sounded hollow, even to her own ears. The classmates exchanged uneasy glances, their skepticism clear. Without another word, they moved on, leaving Maria to grapple with the magnitude of her exposure. That evening, Maria lay in bed, replaying the incident over and over. The embarrassment was excruciating, yet it was the loneliness that gnawed at her most viciously. Her gadgets, once a source of solace, now felt like chains pulling her deeper into isolation. The realization dawned on her that her dependence had grown beyond her control, manifesting in behaviors that not only endangered her academic career but her social life as well. The following weeks were a blur of whispered conversations and sidelong glances. Maria felt like an outsider in her own life, her reputation among her peers tarnished. The incident at the library had marked her as someone unpredictable, someone not to be trusted with group assignments or social invitations. Determined to reclaim some semblance of normalcy, Maria resolved to confront her addiction head-on. She began researching online, looking for stories of others who had faced similar battles, seeking solace in the knowledge that she was not alone. This search led her to a local support group for people struggling with various forms of addiction. The first meeting was the hardest. Maria walked into the room, her nerves taut, expecting judgment. Instead, she found understanding. As she listened to others share their struggles and triumphs, Maria felt a weight lift off her shoulders. Here, in this circle of strangers, she found an unexpected sense of community and a flicker of hope. Emboldened by the support, Maria started therapy. It was a space where she could peel back the layers of her addiction without fear of censure. Her therapist, a kind woman with gentle eyes, helped her understand the triggers of her behavior and equipped her with strategies to cope with stress and anxiety without resorting to her gadgets. As Maria made her way through recovery, the lessons were hard-earned. Each step forward was a victory against her own impulses. The path was neither straight nor easy, but with each passing day, Maria gathered the strength to navigate it, driven by a newfound resolve to heal, not just for her degree, but for her life. Maria sat across from Dr. Bennett, the walls of his office lined with books that seemed to whisper secrets of 1,000 minds he had helped untangle. She was skeptical, nervous, a feeling akin to standing at the edge of a vast, uncharted ocean, about to dive into the unknown depths of her soul. Dr. Bennett, with his gentle demeanor and keen eyes, began their session with a simple question: "What brings you peace, Maria?" It wasn't what she expected. She had prepared herself for probing questions about her habits, her addiction, but this question about peace caught her off guard. "I used to find peace in studying, in being with friends," Maria started, her voice a mere whisper. "Lately, nothing seems to bring that peace. It's just noise." As she spoke, Maria realized how far she had strayed from the person she once knew herself to be. Dr. Bennett nodded, understandingly. "Let's explore that noise," he suggested. "Sometimes, the things we use to silence the discomfort are the things that end up drowning out all the peace." His words were a gentle invitation for her to open up about her dependency on her gadgets. Over the next few weeks, their sessions delved deeper. Maria shared how her gadgets had initially offered a distraction, a way to manage the pressure of her final year. But as time passed, the brief escapes turned into a consuming fire, altering her perception of comfort and need. She confessed how these moments of supposed relief had started to control her life, dictating her schedule, her emotions, and her interactions with others. "It's like I'm there, but I'm not really," Maria admitted during one session. "I'm present in the moment, but I'm not really participating in my life. It's as if I'm watching it pass by from the sidelines." Dr. Bennett listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes, a soft hum escaping his lips, encouraging her to continue. The turning point came when Dr. Bennett introduced Maria to mindfulness exercises. "Let's try to bring you back into the present, into participation," he suggested. They practiced breathing techniques and grounding exercises, which Maria initially resisted. It felt futile, too simple to be effective given the complexity of her issues. Yet, as she persisted, a subtle shift began to occur. Maria started to recognize the triggers that drove her to seek out her gadgets. She learned to sit with her discomfort, to understand it rather than escape it. Slowly, the overwhelming urges began to lose their power, and the noise that had filled her mind started to quiet. "This is you, learning to be the master of your choices again," Dr. Bennett encouraged her, as they reviewed her progress. Maria felt a burgeoning sense of control, a strengthening of her will that she hadn't felt in months. One day, near the end of the semester, Maria walked through the campus, really walked, not just moving but seeing, hearing, and participating. She noticed the crunch of leaves underfoot, the laughter of students at a nearby cafe, the cool breeze that ruffled the pages of her notebook. Each sensation was a reminder of her growth, of her return to presence. As the semester drew to a close, Maria realized that recovery was not a return to who she was before but an evolution into who she was meant to become. Armed with new tools and a deeper understanding of herself, she was ready to face her future, not as a series of escapes but as a series of choices, each one a step towards the peace she had once known and was learning to find again. Recovery is not a straight path, it is a journey with peaks and valleys, shadows and light. Maria learned this the hard way. Every day, she faced her addiction head-on, confronting the fears and insecurities that had driven her to seek solace in her gadgets. But with each step forward, she reclaimed a piece of herself that had been lost. Maria's therapy sessions were intense and emotional. She delved deep into her past, uncovering layers of stress and anxiety that had accumulated over years. Her therapist, Dr. Ellis, was a gentle but firm presence, guiding Maria through the process of understanding her emotions and reactions. Together, they explored the concept of self-worth and how Maria's perfectionism and fear of failure had contributed to her addictive behaviors. In these sessions, Maria learned to identify her triggers, those moments when she felt overwhelmed or inadequate. Dr. Ellis taught her strategies to cope with these feelings in healthier ways, such as mindfulness and journaling. Maria was skeptical at first. The simplicity of these tools seemed mismatched to the complexity of her emotions. However, as she practiced them daily, she began to notice a shift in her mindset. The urge to escape into her gadgets diminished, replaced by a newfound ability to face her challenges directly. Outside of therapy, Maria worked to rebuild her relationships. She reached out to friends she had distanced herself from, explaining her situation and apologizing for her absence. Not everyone understood, but those who did welcomed her back with open arms. These rekindled friendships became a source of strength and comfort, reminding Maria that she was not alone in her struggles. Academically, Maria faced a significant backlog. The prospect of catching up was daunting, and the fear of not performing to her usual standards loomed large. However, Maria now understood that her value was not solely tied to her academic success. She allowed herself to take things one step at a time, setting realistic goals and celebrating small victories. Her professors, aware of her situation, offered additional support and flexibility, which helped ease her anxiety about her studies. As the semester progressed, Maria started participating in campus wellness programs, sharing her experiences with other students. These sessions, initially terrifying, became empowering. Each story she told helped erode the stigma she had once felt about her addiction. In speaking out, she found not only her own voice but also the courage to help others find theirs. One particularly poignant moment came when Maria was invited to speak at a panel on mental health and resilience. Sitting in front of an audience of her peers, she shared her journey openly and honestly. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many students reaching out afterward to thank her for her bravery and to share their own struggles. This feedback reinforced Maria's belief in the power of vulnerability. It was not weakness, as she had once feared, but a bridge to understanding and connection. She realized that every time she spoke her truth, she not only healed a part of herself but also opened the door for others to do the same. As the chapter of her life marked by addiction slowly closed, Maria felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. Ahead of her lay a path filled with potential and new challenges, but she was no longer the fearful student who had sought escape through gadgets. She was a survivor, a friend, and a beacon of hope for others, a woman transformed by her trials, ready to face whatever lay ahead with resilience and grace. Maria stood at the podium, her heart pounding not just from nerves but from the weight of the moment. This was more than a graduation ceremony for her, it was a testament to her journey from darkness back into the light. As she looked out over the sea of faces, fellow graduates, professors, and family, she felt a profound sense of responsibility. Today, I stand before you not just as a graduate but as someone who has traveled through spaces of shadow and uncertainty, Maria began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. I once thought that vulnerability was a weakness, a chink in my armor that I had to hide at all costs. But I've learned that there is incredible strength in admitting you need help, and even greater power in receiving that help. Her speech unfolded, weaving through her personal narrative. She spoke of the days consumed by her addiction, the isolation it wrought, and how it nearly derailed her future. She didn't shy away from the details, the missed test that served as a wake-up call, the painful but necessary intervention by her friends, and the long, often daunting road to recovery. But my story isn't just about the struggle, it's about the triumphs. Every small victory on my way back to myself, Maria continued. She detailed the therapy sessions that opened her eyes to her inner strength and the support systems, both old friends and new, that stood by her side. She talked about the moments of relapse, the times she felt like giving up, and how each time, someone was there to remind her of her worth and her strength. Maria's voice grew more passionate as she shifted from her personal experiences to her advocacy work. Through my journey, I realized how many people suffer in silence, afraid of judgment or misunderstanding. That's why I've dedicated myself to breaking down the stigmas around mental health, especially here on campus. She outlined her initiatives, workshops she organized, support groups she helped found, and conversations she sparked among the student body and administration about mental health resources. Maria shared stories of peers who had reached out to her, drawn by her openness, and how together, they created a network of support that went beyond occasional counseling sessions. Our mental health is just as crucial as our physical health, Maria declared. And just like we wouldn't expect someone with a broken leg to just walk it off, we shouldn't expect those dealing with mental health challenges to simply get over it. We need to be there for each other, to support each other, and to provide the resources necessary for healing. As she concluded her speech, Maria looked around, her eyes meeting those of her professors, her friends, and a sea of strangers. She saw nods of agreement, eyes filled with tears, and faces lit with understanding and empathy. I am here because of the help I received, because of the relentless support, and because I learned to support myself. Let us all be that support for someone else. Let's continue to build a community where no one has to suffer alone, where no one has to feel that asking for help is a sign of weakness. The applause that followed was not just for Maria's academic achievements but for her courage and her commitment to change. As she stepped down from the podium, she felt a clarity and purpose stronger than any she had ever known. Her journey had been arduous, but it had led her to a place where she could make a real difference, not just in her life but in the lives of others.